Jesus is not God. At best, he was an itinerant preacher who was a product of his environment in the ways that they thought of God in first century. And then he got legendized into this Jesus Messiah character. This is a very complex situation that I'll probably discuss in a live on Monday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. But let me give you the simple solution of this. In First John, it is John quoting Jesus saying that when he was being claimed of blasphemy by the Pharisees and Sadducees, that he said, "Is it not written that ye are gods?" And many people today, will, even those outside of the Bible, will run around and say that we are gods. I am a God, little g God, because Jesus said that ye are gods. And he is quoting from Psalms 82. Well, in Psalms 82, it starts out by talking about how Elion comes and sits at this divine council of the Elohim, which are the sons of gods and all the many gods, the B'nai Elohim. That these are many different gods, and these many different gods are out here not judging the people or treating the people correctly. You see, many modern day Christians try to make this seem like it is talking about human judges, and that Jesus was saying that if human judges in the past can be considered gods, then it is not blasphemy for him to make that same statement in the first century CE, because is it not written that all of you are gods, all of us are gods? It's not what it meant. It shows that Jesus was only thinking it meant that because that's what they thought at that time frame. But when we look at the history of Judaism, Judaism has went from being a polytheistic religion to a henotheistic religion to a monotheistic religion in its whole pathway. Polytheistic, most people know what that means. That is the belief in multiple gods. Henotheistic is the belief that your God is your God and everybody else God does exist, but we don't worship all those other gods. And monotheism is strictly the belief in one God. But when you look at the Bible and understand it from the point of Genesis, and when you look at the history of the Israelite people, you will clearly understand this. And like I said, it's very complex when you add in the historicity of who they were under, meaning the Babylonians, the Persians, the Assyrians, and so on and so forth, the Egyptians, and how their religion changed throughout a 1,000-year process. You can recognize the different elements within the Bible where they were polytheistic, henotheistic, and monotheistic. So in reference to the "is it not written that ye are gods," the main concept here is the fact that the God Most High sits on a council with all the other Elohims, and Yahweh is simply one of the B'nai Elohims, one of the generations of the Most High God, who was then put in charge of a people group. When you read Deuteronomy 32, it specifically says that Elion gave out all the inheritances to all the different people, to all the different B'nai Elohim, all the other different gods. And to Yahweh, Jacob, the Israelites, were given him as an inheritance. You can only gain an inheritance from someone. You cannot give yourself an inheritance. It has to be acquired from someone else. So in Deuteronomy, it is demonstrating um, polytheism, because when you also look at this in Genesis, anytime it says God, it is referring to El Elyon. When it says the Lord, it is in reference to Yahweh. This is why it goes back and forth from God to Yahweh. So anytime someone like Abraham or Noah or Moses is having a conversation with this God and it uses God, it's using El Elyon. When it's talking about Lord, when it says uses Lord, it's talking about Yahweh, El Elion's son, one of many. So when the Genesis and Deuteronomies, during those time frames, they were polytheistic. This is why the writing is polytheistic. Now, many of these stories and ideas were being told when they were under and merged with Canaanites, when they were the same as other Canaanites, and they had the God El and they had the God Yahweh, who Yahweh was a son of El. As they move forward through time, and then they're being conquered by they're under the Egyptians, under the Assyrians. Then when they get conquered under the Babylonians, they still have this sense of El and Yahweh, but then they start changing it towards the end of the Babylonian captivity because now they're under Persian rule. Under Persian rule, there is only one God, and that one God is Ahura Mazda, Ahura Mazda, who has a demonic side, which is Agramenyum. But in the transition, they went from the polytheistic to the henotheistic, where El and Yahweh begin to merge together. And this is where in the Bible we see these mergings together, because even when we talk about the book of Job, there is a separation between Yahweh and the Most High. When we were looking at Deuteronomy, as I said, there is a separation between El and the Most High. So Yahweh and the Most High. So you have this separation. It is not until after the Babylonian captivity, or during the Babylonian captivity and after, that El and Yahweh begin to be merged, and then his wife Asherah is disposed of. And then it's after the Babylonian captivity that they go strictly towards monotheism. And by the second century BCE, first century BCE, they start being monotheistic. So this is why Jesus is a product of that environment, because he is in the stage of monotheism when he says that ye are gods, and thinking that Psalms 82 was talking about human judges. But the human judges who will fall like men, he is actually talking about the B'nai Elohim. If you continue to be unjust, you will fall like men. Why? Because in Genesis chapter 1, when it says, and these are the generations of the heavens and the earth, it is talking about the generations of the Elohim, the council of gods, making people. When Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 says that let us go make man, it is the heavenly council that is going to make man, making different variations of man, that each Elohim gets an inheritance of certain land masses and people to instruct and be the judge over these people. So Psalms 82 is talking about how the different Elohim have been judging and utilizing their own people. Now, we see this in other parts of the Bible as well, where the Elyon is talking about how the different gods are not doing their job, and how Yahweh, who created Adam and Eve in the garden, how he's raising his and how other gods are raising theirs. And then the combative nature between the two when the people go and worship the other gods, how this Yahweh God feels about that. So we're getting the narrative from the Yahweh God's perspective 90% of the time. But then we see when he battles Shamash, that Shamash defeats him, because the Moabites defeat the Israelites. We see the acknowledgement of it when Gabriel and Daniel, he is delayed because he's fighting the Prince of Persia, one of the angels of Shamash. And it is not until Michael comes and helps him to fight. This is a henotheistic belief system, because now Michael comes and helps him to fight, and now he defeats the Prince of Persia, which is one of the angels of Shamash. So the Bible indicates this throughout the whole time frame. But if Jesus truly was God, and he would have known that Psalms 82, it's not talking about people, but it's talking about the sons of God, the heavenly council. In the same way in Job, the heavenly council is convened, and the Satan is merely just one of the B'nai Elohims of the heavenly council. And then later on in that same story, when all the B'nai Elohim scream and cheer all loudly when heaven was being created. See, you're supposed to just be worshiping the Most High in the belief of this Bible. But Jesus seems not to get the whole evolution of it, because he's a product of his environment. Now, at the end of the day, it is all a bunch of bullshit. It is all just the perspective of one group of people who made up a God for themselves based on the environment that they were in, and we can see how they kept changing it based on the different environments they were in over the centuries. We'll talk more deeply about this on Monday on our live at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. So always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.